My name is Diana Hayes. I am 34 years old and I have worked for everything I have, quietly, methodically, and almost entirely without my family's knowledge. That last part was not an accident. Growing up in the Hayes household meant growing up in the shadow of my father, Raymond Hayes, a man who measured love in conditions and success in comparisons. He was not cruel in the dramatic, obvious ways that people recognize easily. He was the other kind. The kind who smiled while he diminished you, who offered encouragement with one hand and pulled the floor out with the other. The kind whose damage takes years to name because it arrived so politely. My brother, Clifton, was the golden child. 3 years older, effortlessly charming, and completely uninterested in earning any of the reverence our father heaped on him. Clifton was going to take over the family's commercial property management firm one day. That was simply decided the way weather is decided. It was not up for discussion. I was the other one. The daughter. The one who would do fine, probably. The one who was smart, maybe too smart, a little too serious for her own good. The one who, at 16, watched her father present Clifton with a car at his birthday party and then turned to her with a shrug. "You'll get a used one when you're ready. No point spending the same." I did not cry. I smiled and said thank you for the cake. My mother, Sandra Hayes, was not unkind the way my father was. She was passive in the specific way that enables cruelty. Always present, always watching, always finding a way to reframe the dynamic so that everyone could pretend it wasn't happening. When I graduated valedictorian of my high school class and my father spent the reception talking to Clifton's football coach, my mother squeezed my hand and said, "He's proud of you. He just doesn't always show it." I nodded. I filed it. I filed a lot of things. College I paid for myself. Partial scholarship, 2 part-time jobs, and a stubbornness that my academic advisor called remarkable, and my father called unnecessary. He had offered to help, a fact he reminded me of regularly, but the offer had come with conditions so layered and controlling that accepting it would have meant surrendering the one thing I had figured out I needed more than money: autonomy. It was in my junior year of college that I met Harold Whitmore. I was working a weekend catering shift at a university alumni gala, the kind of event where the servers are invisible and the guests are not. I had just cleared a table when an older man in a quiet gray suit asked me, with genuine curiosity, what I was studying. Most guests at those events do not ask the servers anything. I told him, finance and economics with a minor in data analysis. He asked why. I told him I wanted to understand how money moved, not just how to make it but how institutions used it, protected it, allocated it, and occasionally weaponized it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he handed me his card. Harold Whitmore, President and Chief Executive Officer, First National Bank of the Midwest. "Come see me Monday," he said. "I want to hear the rest of that answer." I went on Monday. I was 21 years old, I wore the best blazer I owned, and I had spent the entire weekend preparing for a conversation I was terrified of getting wrong. Harold Whitmore met me in his corner office, poured 2 cups of coffee without asking, and spent the next 2 hours asking me questions. Not testing me, genuinely asking. He wanted to know how I thought. By the end of the meeting, he had offered me a summer internship on his personal strategy team, reporting directly to him. That summer changed everything. Harold was brilliant in the way that people who have nothing left to prove are brilliant. Unhurried, precise, and completely without ego. He taught me how to read a balance sheet the way a doctor reads an X-ray. He walked me through acquisition strategy, risk modeling, and the specific psychology of institutional lending. He introduced me to people whose names I had only seen in publications. And somewhere in that summer, the professional relationship quietly became something else. Mentorship in the truest sense, the kind where someone sees not just what you are but what you are capable of and decides to invest in it. By the time I graduated, Harold had connected me with a position at a regional investment firm. Within 3 years I had been promoted twice. Within 5, I had left to launch my own financial consulting practice, Hayes Capital Advisory, with 2 partners and Harold's quiet, unofficial blessing. He reviewed my business plan. He made 3 introductions that opened doors I would not have opened for another decade. He attended my company's launch dinner and gave a toast that made one of my partners cry. He called himself my Uncle Harold, a title that had started as a joke during my 2nd year working with him, when he'd called me his unofficial niece. At a conference where I'd handled a difficult client with composure he said reminded him of himself at that age. The title had stuck. I used it only with him privately. He used it everywhere. I told my family almost none of this. Not because I was hiding, not exactly. It was more precise than that. I had watched my father's pattern long enough to understand it completely. He responded to success the way a plant responds to light. He turned toward it and then he consumed it. Clifton's entire career had been slowly absorbed into my father's orbit. His decisions second-guessed, his clients occasionally redirected, his confidence quietly hollowed. I had spent my adult life building something that was entirely my own, and I had learned from watching Clifton that the surest way to protect it was to say very little. So when family dinners turned to "what's happening with work?" I said fine, busy the usual. When my mother asked if I was making enough, I said yes, comfortably. When my father, on 2 separate occasions, suggested I might want to consider working for his property firm, "Stability, Diana, you should think about stability," I thanked him for the thought and changed the subject. Hayes Capital Advisory, by the time of the events I am about to describe, managed approximately $140 million in client assets. Our last annual review had been covered in a regional business journal under the headline, "The Quiet Firm Making Loud Returns." Harold had texted me a photo of the article with a single line, "Told you so." My family had not seen the article. I had not shown it to them. The loan situation began as most family complications do, without warning and in the middle of something else. It was a Tuesday evening in October. I was at my desk reviewing a client portfolio when my phone buzzed with a text from Clifton. "Dad's trying to refinance the Delmore Street property and expand the Westgate portfolio. Taking out a big loan. Thought you should know." I stared at the message for a moment. Clifton adding "thought you should know" meant one of two things. Either he was uncomfortable with something or he was preparing to ask me for something. I replied, "How big?" He answered 3 minutes later, $3.2 million. I set my phone down and went back to my client portfolio. It was not my business technically. My father ran his firm. He made his own decisions. He had made that clear for most of my adult life. But 2 days later my mother called. She called in the specific tone she used when she needed something. Warm, a little rushed, landing on the request before the pleasantries had fully finished. "Your father has a meeting at First National on Thursday," she said. "The downtown branch. He's applying for a commercial refinancing loan and it's a significant amount, and you know how these things can be. We just thought, since you work in finance, maybe you'd come along. For support. Show the family is united." I understood what she was asking. She was asking me to sit in the room and look credible while my father borrowed $3.2 million from a bank she did not know I had a 20-year relationship with. "I'll be there," I said. "Wonderful," she said. "Smart casual. Don't overdress." I did not tell her that the president of First National had attended my 30th birthday dinner. Wednesday evening I called Harold. He picked up on the second ring the way he always did when he saw my name. "Diana." His voice carried the warmth of someone genuinely glad to hear from you. "I was just thinking about the Meridian refinancing you recommended last quarter. You were right, by the way. Numbers came in exactly as you modeled." "I'm glad," I said. "Harold, I need to tell you something before tomorrow." I explained the situation cleanly and without editorializing. My father was applying for a $3.2 million commercial refinancing loan at the downtown First National branch. I would be present. He should know before it happened rather than during it. There was a brief silence. "Does he know about us?" Harold asked. "No," I said. "He knows I work in finance. He doesn't know the specifics." Another pause. Harold Whitmore had known me for 13 years. He had watched me navigate my family dynamic with the same careful precision I applied to everything else, and he respected it the way he respected all deliberate strategies. "Do you want me to stay in my office?" he asked. "I want you to do exactly what you would normally do," I said. "I'm not asking you to intervene. I'm just telling you so there's no surprise." "Understood," he said. And then quietly, "Diana, if they're unkind to you in my building, I won't stay in my office." I smiled. "I know," I said. "Good night, Harold." Thursday morning I dressed deliberately, not to impress but to be comfortable in my own presence. Dark navy blazer, clean lines, the watch Harold had given me when Hayes Capital hit its first $50 million in managed assets. I arrived at the downtown First National branch at 9:45, 15 minutes before my parents. I sat in the waiting area near the far corner. Took out my phone. Waited. My parents arrived at 10:00. My father walked the way he always walked into rooms he considered beneath him, with the particular energy of a man who had decided in advance that he was the most important person present and was waiting for everyone else to catch up. He wore his best suit, the charcoal one he reserved for what he called serious occasions. My mother was beside him, alert and composed, scanning the room the way she always did in unfamiliar environments, cataloging exits and status markers simultaneously. They saw me in the corner. My mother gave a small, approving nod. My father barely registered me. The loan officer, a young woman named Patricia, according to her nameplate, efficient and professional, greeted them at the desk and invited them to sit. I took the chair along the side wall, slightly behind and to the left of my father, the position I had occupied my entire childhood. Present, peripheral, unacknowledged. The meeting began respectfully enough. Patricia reviewed the application, confirmed the property details on Delmore Street, and began walking through the standard qualification process. My father answered her questions with the brisk impatience of someone who considers administrative process an insult to his time. It was when Patricia explained that the loan-to-value ratio on the Delmore property, combined with the existing debt structure on the Westgate portfolio, would require additional documentation and a secondary review before approval, that my father's temperature changed. Additional documentation, he repeated. Not a question. A verdict. Yes, sir, it's standard procedure for commercial refinancing above. I've been banking here for 11 years, my father said. He leaned forward slightly. 11 years. I have 3 accounts at this branch. I would like to speak with someone who can actually make a decision. Patricia, to her considerable credit, did not flinch. I can escalate to our commercial lending manager, Mr. Hayes. He handles. I need this approved today, my father said, his voice dropping into the register he used when he wanted to make clear that patience had expired. Get me someone with actual authority. My mother, seated beside him, did not miss a beat. We didn't come here for entry-level staff. The waiting area was not empty. A couple across the room glanced over. A man near the window looked up from his phone. Patricia's expression remained professional with the particular effort of someone maintaining composure under conditions they did not create and cannot fix. I sat in my corner. I looked at my phone. Sure, I said quietly. No one heard me. That was fine. I opened my messages. Found Harold's name. Typed without hurry. Uncle Harold. My parents are at your downtown branch right now. Loan application under Hayes. $3.2 million commercial refinancing. Thought you should know before it went further. I sent it. Put my phone face down on my knee. Looked up. My father was still speaking to Patricia, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who had spent decades being the loudest person in every room. My mother was nodding along with the expression she wore when she was endorsing his position while technically remaining silent. Patricia was listening with the patience of a professional who had heard this speech before under different names. I watched the elevator at the far end of the hallway. For 4 minutes nothing happened. My father demanded Patricia contact a manager. Patricia explained that the commercial lending manager was currently with another client. My father suggested that the other client could wait. My mother said, pleasantly, that surely someone in this building could simply look at their application and make a sensible decision. The elevator opened. Harold Whitmore stepped out. At 62, he carried himself with the unhurried assurance of someone who had long ago stopped needing to prove anything to anyone. He was in his standard Thursday morning attire. Dark suit, no tie, the reading glasses he wore pushed up on his forehead. He had his phone in one hand. He looked down the hallway. Found me immediately. His face did what it always did when he saw me. It settled into something warm and genuine, the expression of someone arriving somewhere they are glad to be. He walked toward the waiting area with his arms already open. There she is, he said. I stood. He embraced me the way he always did. Briefly, firmly, the hug of a man who does not perform affection but does not withhold it either. He stepped back and looked at me with the appraising warmth of someone checking that you are well. You look good, he said. The Meridian numbers really did come in clean, Diana. You should be proud. I'll take the credit, I said. He laughed, a short real laugh, and then turned. My father had gone completely still. He was looking at Harold Whitmore the way a person looks at something that does not fit inside the logic they have constructed for the world. The charcoal suit, the easy authority, The way the entire branch had subtly recalibrated the moment he stepped off the elevator. All of it was arriving in my father's understanding slowly in pieces the way very cold water arrives. My mother's hand had stopped midway through adjusting her bracelet. Harold turned to them with the measured courtesy he extended to everyone. "You must be Diana's parents," he said. "Harold Whitmore." He extended his hand to my father. My father shook it. Automatically. The way you shake a hand when your brain is still catching up to your body. "I'm the president here," Harold said simply without theater. "I understand you've been waiting. Patricia is excellent. She was following correct procedure on a refinancing of this complexity. But I wanted to come down myself." He paused. "Diana mentioned you'd be in." The sentence landed quietly. My father's eyes moved to me. I said nothing. I had learned a very long time ago that silence at the right moment is its own kind of statement. My father started. Stopped. "She's been one of my most trusted advisors for nearly a decade," Harold said. His voice was pleasant, conversational, entirely without edge. That was the thing about Harold, he never needed edge. The facts were sufficient. "I'm not sure how much she's shared with you about her work, but Hayes Capital Advisory has been doing remarkable things. I refer clients to her regularly." He glanced at me. "She's too modest." I watched my father process this. There was a specific sequence to it. I could track it almost like a transaction going through stages of review. First, the instinct to reassert, to find the angle from which this information could be repositioned so that it fit the existing picture. Then, the realization that there was no such angle. And finally, the stillness. The particular stillness of a man whose understanding of a room has been fundamentally revised and who has not yet decided what to do with that revision. My mother had both hands folded in her lap. She was looking at the table. My mother began. Also stopped. "Shall we step into the conference room?" Harold said. "I'd like to review the application personally. And I'd like Diana to sit in if she's willing. Given the structure of the loan, her perspective on the portfolio distribution would be genuinely useful." He looked at me with a question in his expression. The professional question, not the personal one. I looked at my father. His jaw was set. His shoulders had done the thing they did when he was recalibrating. A very small, almost imperceptible adjustment, the internal shifting of a man who has just discovered that the room he thought he was the most powerful person in has different geometry than he understood. My mother was looking at me differently. Not with the vague approval she'd worn when I arrived. The look that said I had dressed appropriately and would not embarrass anyone. This was something else. The expression of someone who is rapidly counting backwards through years of conversation and finding gaps she had not known were there. Patricia, the loan officer, had gone quietly professional in the way that people do when they have witnessed something they are not supposed to have seen. She was gathering her folders. He did not look at my father. "I'm willing," I said. The conference room meeting lasted 47 minutes. Harold reviewed the application with the precision of someone who had done this 10,000 times and still brought genuine attention to each iteration. He asked my father clear, direct questions about the Delmore property's revenue history and the Westgate expansion timeline. My father answered, initially with the residual confidence of someone who has not yet fully processed what has happened, and then with increasing care, as the meeting made clear that the man across the table understood exactly what he was looking at. I was asked twice for my assessment of specific line items. I gave it cleanly in the language of the profession without performance. Harold nodded both times in the way he nodded when something confirmed what he already suspected. My mother sat beside my father and said almost nothing. I watched her watching me with an expression I had not seen on her face before, or perhaps one I had seen and never correctly identified. A recalibration of her own, the specific quiet of a person who is revising a picture they had held for a very long time. At the end of the meeting, Harold told my father that the application would be expedited through secondary review and that he expected a decision within 5 business days. He stood, shook hands with both my parents and then turned to me. "Walk with me," he said. We walked to the elevator. Behind us, I heard my parents gathering their documents in silence. In the hallway, Harold pressed the elevator button and looked at me with the expression of a man choosing his words. "You never told them," he said. It was not a question. "No," I said. "Why today?" I considered the question. "I didn't plan it," I said. "They asked me to come for support. I came." Harold was quiet for a moment. The elevator arrived. He held the door. "Diana," he said. "At some point the people who love you should know who you are." I looked at him. "They know who they decided I am," I said. "That's different." He held my gaze for a moment. Then he nodded, the slow nod of someone who understands something they wish were otherwise. "Call me this week," he said. "I want to talk through the Meridian secondary position." "I will," I said. The elevator closed. I stood in the hallway for a moment and then I turned. My parents were still at the conference room doorway. My father was holding his folder. My mother's hands were folded in front of her. They were both looking at me with expressions I did not have clean names for. Not quite guilt, not quite pride, not quite apology, something in the uncharted space between all three. My father opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "Diana. I'll call you about Thanksgiving," I said. "Drive safe." I picked up my bag from the waiting area chair. I nodded to Patricia, who gave me a small, professional smile that contained, I thought, a considerable amount of private satisfaction. And I walked out of the First National Bank of the Midwest into a clear October morning. My phone rang before I reached my car. "Clifton. Dad just called me," he said without preamble. "What happened in there?" "He applied for a loan," I said. "Standard process." "Diana." His voice had the particular tone he used when he wanted me to stop performing and talk to him. "He said the bank president came down personally. He said he knew you." He said, a pause. "How long?" 13 years, I said. Silence. Long enough that I checked to make sure the call was still connected. 13 years, Clifton repeated. "And you never said anything. You never asked the right questions," I said. Not unkindly. It was simply true. Another silence. And then Clifton said something I had not expected. "I'm sorry, Diana. I should have asked more questions a long time ago." I stood beside my car in the October sun and felt something shift. Not dramatically, not with the resolution of a story reaching its ending, but quietly, the way a door that has been slightly ajar for years finally opens enough to let in light. "Thank you," I said. "Is the loan going to go through?" he asked. "Probably," I said. "Harold is thorough. The application is solid enough." "Do you have any say in it?" I got in my car. "I didn't ask for any," I said. "That's not why I was there." "Then why were you there?" I thought about it honestly, not the answer I would give at a dinner party or to a journalist or to anyone who needed a clean narrative, but the actual answer, the one that lived in the part of me that had still shown up when called, that had still driven downtown on a Thursday morning to sit in a corner chair in a bank lobby for parents who had never once asked what I did at work. I thought about it honestly. Why had I gone? I had not gone to reveal anything. I had not gone to correct the record or settle an account. I had gone because my mother had asked me to come for support, and because somewhere beneath all the careful architecture of distance I had built between myself and my family, I was still the person who showed up when asked. "Because they're my parents," I said. "Even still." Clifton was quiet. "Yeah," he said finally. "Yeah." The loan was approved 11 days later, 4 business days ahead of Harold's estimate. My father called to tell me. He was brief, formal, a man navigating unfamiliar emotional terrain with the tools of someone who had never been taught to use them. "The approval came through," he said. "Harold Whitmore's office called directly." Pause. "He mentioned you again." "Good," I said. Another pause. The longest one. "I didn't know," my father said. "About any of it. Your work. Your connections. I didn't know." I had rehearsed versions of this conversation in my mind for years. Imagined what I would say, how much I would say, whether the moment would feel like justice or grief or something else entirely. Now that it was here, I found I didn't want any of the rehearsed lines. The rehearsed lines belonged to a version of this moment that was about winning. This was not that. "I know you didn't," I said. "You could have." He had no answer for that. Neither of us did really. "Thanksgiving," he said finally. "Come for Thanksgiving." "I'll think about it," I said. And I meant it. Not as a performance of forgiveness, not as the closing chapter of a story with clean edges, but as the actual complicated truth of where I was. A woman who had built something real and quiet and entirely her own, who was still in some rooms of herself the girl in the corner chair, watching, filing, waiting. A woman who had learned that the most powerful thing was not the revelation, not the moment the elevator opened and Harold walked toward her and her father went still. The most powerful thing was every day before that. The work, the patience, the long and private labor of becoming someone whose name meant something. Harold had told me once, early in my career, that the most underestimated force in any institution was sustained, quiet competence. That the people who built things that lasted were rarely the loudest ones in the room. He had said it offhandedly, over coffee after a strategy session, and I had written it on a note card that still sat on the corner of my desk 13 years later, the ink slightly faded, the cardstock soft at the edges. I had been taking notes. I always had been.